Hi everyone, this video is part 3 of the Motivation, Emotion, and Personality unit. In this video, I will cover influences on our emotion, stress, and health. It is important though that you watch the previous video, part 2, about the theories of emotion, because this is just the second piece of that as far as taking emotions and then understanding just our expressive behaviors that come with emotions and just the influences on our emotions itself. So to start with, the spillover effect. So the spillover effect, I think, is a great name for this concept because if you think of something spilling over onto someone else, that's a lot like what the spillover effect is. So the spillover effect is the tendency for one person's emotions to affect how other people feel around them, and the people around that individual might not even be conscious of it. But if someone in the room is very happy, it can spill over and other people can almost like you might even say like feed off of that emotion. So if, for example, a teacher is just really excited and happy and maybe they have something just really great going on in their life and they just are exuding that in the classroom, it can spill over onto their students, and their students will probably report also being in a good mood and feeling good about that class period. So that is the spillover effect. The next influence on emotion is called the facial feedback theory. And the facial feedback theory is the tendency for our own facial muscles and how they are positioned, or the facial expression I am exhibiting can correspond with my own personal feelings, or how it can impact my own personal feelings. So, for example, smiling can actually activate the feeling of being happy, even if that smile was just a fake smile. So, for example, a study was done giving people Botox and then measuring the correlation between those paralyzed muscles or the Botox and then the reported feelings that those people had. And there is believed to be a correlation between that just having that paralyzed facial muscles, especially around the frowning muscles, and then people also reporting having better feelings. And so this suggests that Botox could be a possible treatment for depressed feelings. But there's been other studies on smiling and how that triggers happiness, or people being forced to smile and then reporting happier feelings versus people who are forced to scowl and being just reporting less happy feelings. And so the facial feedback theory is the idea that our facial expressions are correlated with actually how we feel and could impact how we feel. The next slide has to do with research that has been done on cultural displays of emotion. So, cross-culturally, how is emotion being expressed? Is it being expressed in the same ways or not in the same ways? And there's been different research on this as far as cross-cultural displays of emotion, but one person that you will need to be familiar with is Paul Ekman. And Paul Ekman's studies were based on this idea that there are universal emotions. So Paul Ekman believed that there were just some basic emotions, and you can see those emotions displayed on this first slide. He's got anger and disgust. He's got this fear. He has happiness, sadness, and surprise. And so he actually took all of these photographs that he took to a tribal culture to see if these groups of people who weren't exposed um, to a Western society, if they would recognize facial expressions from someone in a Western society. And so he felt like there were 6 different displays of emotion that were consistent that he called universal emotions that could be displayed. And so you can see here would have been an example where he took pictures and then asked, what display of emotion is this? And he felt that there was this universal expression of emotion between these 6 different emotions and facial displays. And he believed that this extended across cultures. Next, he took this further, and Paul Ekman went even further into this study of emotional displays, and he started mapping out on the face the different facial movements that moved with those emotional expressions. And he noticed that some of these facial movements were actually even really, really small. Just even a twitch of fear or anger could be seen in the eyebrows, or disgust could be seen in the nose, even just a really quick flicker. He found out that even people who were trying to hide their emotions, he would notice there would be a trigger in these different facial areas on the face. And so he called these micro expressions, that were these very subtle movements of the face that would be connected with an emotional feeling. Um, Now, Paul Ekman, he believed that these micro expressions moving in the face were better at revealing true emotion than when when people are trying to detect how someone feels, who isn't trained in looking for all of these different facial movements. There are ways that we try to use biological detections to see how someone is feeling. Police officers and in the criminal justice system, people use polygraphs, and polygraphs are testing a stress response. And the idea is that someone might be more stressed when they are lying, and so they want to get a baseline for how that person, their heart rate, and their stress response, and then when asking questions related to whatever they're looking into, the thought is that they might be more stressed or show some kind of change in their stress response, and that would come through on the polygraph test. Now, it is believed that the polygraph test, though, is not a good representation of that. Paul Ekman would say it's even a better ability to detect how someone's feeling and thinking if you can see those leaked micro expressions. Next, we have the behavioral displays of emotion that you can see in your body language. And one of the things that's important for you to know is just cross-culturally, body language is not something that is universal, and that when you are just if you're visiting another culture, or if you are interacting with someone who is from another part of the world, that you might not be expressing how you feel in the same way that someone else might receive it the way you intend it. So, for example, hand gestures around the world don't always mean the same thing. And the way that you gesture to someone else could mean something completely different, depending on where you are around the world. It could even be offensive. And also, something that is unique to different places is your physical contact when you're in social situations. There are some countries where there is very close and lots of physical contact and touching during like social conversations with people. And there are other cultures who leave lots of space and do not touch one another. Eye contact is another thing that is very different, that can communicate something completely different to someone from another culture based on how you're feeling and thinking. And as far as body language goes, it's not a universal like social norms or rule sets for body language. Next, we're going to move into how emotion is displayed, and it's going to be in this realm of stress, is this next piece. And so, stress in the body is, if we're talking about biologically what's going on when we are feeling anxiety and stress, we're seeing an activation of the sympathetic nervous system. And the sympathetic nervous system is that part of your nervous system that is speeding up your body functions. Typically, in a situation where you are feeling stress and anxiety, it can be a dangerous situation. It could just be a situation in which you're nervous, but your sympathetic nervous system activates your heart rate. It activates your breathing. Your heart rate starts to increase. Your breathing starts to increase. You start to sweat, and you know that feeling when you're feeling stressed and nervous and anxious, and that is your sympathetic nervous system. So, as we're moving forward, what is going on when a stress is occurring and you feel that you have that trigger of your anxiety? There is an actual progression of what happens in our body when we have stress. And so the general adaptation syndrome, or the GAS, or you can abbreviate it GAS, this is the process of stress through the body if we maintain this high level of stress for a long period of time. So this is a three-stage process, and it's just describing the physiological changes that occur through your body when you're under stress for a prolonged period of time. So there's three phases. There's the alarm phase, and this is when the person is exposed to some kind of stressor and they're entering into this fight or flight situation. They're going to have a release of the adrenaline hormone and the stress hormone cortisol. They're going to have probably a boost of energy. They're going to have their heart rate increase. And so you can see when that stressor is exposed to the person and the person is going in meeting this stress, they start to, you can see, have their stress level increase. So their blood pressure is going to rise, but they're going to come into this stage of resistance where their body's going to try to counteract that alarm stage. And during the resistance stage, the body is going to try to return to normal, but if the person is still exposed to that stress and they're still in that state of anxiety and alertness, the body will just continue to produce those stress hormones, and this can cause the person to be irritable and have difficulty concentrating. And if it's going to be an extended period of time, the person is eventually just going to enter the exhaustion phase, and this is where the body is, you are exhausted from stress. You're so exhausted that you're just not going to be equipped to fight that stress. You're not going to resist it anymore. And oftentimes what can happen in this stage is you can become incredibly tired, depressed. You can also be really susceptible to illness in this stage. And so this, and I mean, if exposed to high intensity stress for a really long time, could even be potentially harmful to that person's life for an extended period of time. Next, we have coping with stress, and there's different ways that people cope with stress. One way is to fight the stress and try to combat it or flee from it. But one you might not be as familiar with is a stress response called tend and befriend. And this is a stress response that some people exhibit under stress when they try to cope, they try to help others. So they might try to protect other people, or maybe they try to join in and help others in that moment of stress, rather than having this I've got to meet it head on. I'm going to go help others, and I'm going to go extend this to other people. I'm going to bond with others over this situation. And it's been associated with women more often than men, but that does not mean that men don't have this stress response, but it is something that is often more associated with women. And that doesn't also mean that women don't take this fight or flight response either, but just a tendency. Next, we have what I explained earlier. Under extreme stress for long, prolonged periods of time, we see illness can happen. And so psychoneuroimmunology is a big word, but it's basically referencing the combination of how your body and mind and your health can all kind of intertwine. So it's an area of research of how your body and your mind and your emotional stress can impact how your body works. Lymphocytes are a type of white blood cell that work in your body's immune system. They help fight infections and viruses, but under stress, that energy can be shifted away from the immune system and can actually impact your lymphocytes that are not going to be able to fight off that stress. Lastly, we have different personality types and how they can be related to stress. So people who are type A personalities are people who are just tend to be a little more high strung. They're competitive. They might be a little bit just have a little bit more stress in their life, whereas type B personalities are kind of go with the flow type of personalities. And there's a correlation between people who are high strung and people who get coronary heart disease. Now, that doesn't mean you will have coronary heart disease, but there is a correlation between people who have high strung personalities and lifestyles and heart disease later in life. Guys, that was it. I hope that was helpful.